What was your upbringing like?
I had a good upbringing. I was brought up in Arbromarifin, which is the most westerly point on the British mainland, on a croft, which it was pretty idyllic, really. It was had a lot of freedom, surrounded by animals, and it was good. I was the youngest of 5. My folks worked incredibly hard, so I think that really set me up for my career and a life in business, developing that really strong work ethic. And I think living in an environment as remote as that, you end up developing a lot of sort of enterprising skills and problem-solving skills. There's not someone there to call on for every eventuality. So I think it's quite good at building your skills for life, I would say.
The use of baler twine, perhaps. So what was it that got you interested in life sciences when you were young?
So I was always generally interested in that type of thing. I was really quite focused on, at one point, being a vet. I was I'm a real animal lover, and I thought that would be a good path. But in the end, I decided I was good in science and maths, and I decided to do a crash hire in biology in 6th year. And that really made me realise that that's what I wanted to do. It was then that I thought, yeah, I love this, that's going to be my path. So I ended up doing an honours degree in biological sciences. And then from there, my career really took me through the whole life sciences field, really.
So how did you get interested in business and the opportunities it offered you, perhaps, rather than maybe an academic career?
I think I've always been business-minded. I didn't know it at the time, but when I think back, I think I was always quite business-minded. After I'd done my degree, I felt I'd had enough of studying and went straight into industry. And I think even in my early days of my career, I kind of understood the challenges of the business as opposed to always from the employee's point of view. Mm-hmm. And I think as I developed and then moved into my first sort of more senior role in Roslin sales, I really felt like I had an interest in every aspect of the business. I understood that for a business to survive, you needed to be able to make money, and that ultimately it was about the money and the people that was the key things when you're trying to grow a business. So I think it was probably always in me. I think my upbringing probably brought that out, and also then I was just getting the opportunities to then take a key role and ultimately take a business right the way forward.
How did you identify, or how were you identified for those kind of opportunities? I think it was a bit of both.
So I spent the first part of my career in sort of large CROs, small biotech, and then when I moved into Roslin sales, I was brought in really because of my sort of experience in quality management systems and to set that up. But I think in some ways I identified myself and I drove it rather than someone tapping me on the shoulder and say, we want you to do that. I just took the initiative and saw the gap. I think I always say in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. So I just knew what to do and did it. And I quite quickly became the Chief Operating Officer of Roslin Sales and kind of drove that forward. But for me within Roslin Sales, I didn't have the full autonomy really to make the business decisions, and it wasn't until I became Chief Exec of RoslinCT that I was able to do that. But I suppose I demonstrated that I was capable just by actually doing it.
So taking the initiative clearly put you on your own radar, but on other individuals' radars and so on, so that you could get the opportunities that that's just extended your responsibilities, gave you a challenge that you liked, the business side of it as much as anything else.
Yeah, it's almost like seeing what needs done and understanding that there's all the different aspects that need to be looked after. So and just taking up that mantle, I guess.
I suppose looking at the start, at the early days of Roslin sales, as it were, back then, what was your biggest issue in terms of building the business? What did you focus on?
So if you think back, it was, what would have been 2007. So at that time, Roslin Sales was ahead of its time in the field of regenerative medicine and clinical grade stem cells. So some of the early challenges were in the science of translating that basic research. So when I joined, there was 3 people in the lab and they were producing stem cells at research level. So it was actually converting that into clinical stem cells. So a lot of the equipment, a lot of the materials weren't at a level that we needed. So it was like educating the suppliers and sourcing everything we needed to make that clinically suitable. But also there was the experience side, and that was a theme right the way through, is that because the field isn't developed, then the people haven't developed the skills that you need. So it was about educating and training people and trying to source the people that would have the aptitude to learn what we needed to, and also taking the academic scientists that had an aptitude for business and merging the two, really. So I think that I would say the sort of state of the field at the time, the experience of the people, and as well, if you think of a business trying to make money, there wasn't necessarily the outlet for the clinical grade stem cells at that time that there would be now. The business had to survive a lot on grant funding, and that made it a bit challenging.
So there was kind of a number of aspects there to unpick, but if I'm, I suppose, correct in summarising, one of the big ones was obviously what you didn't really exist in any real shape or form, so you had to kind of build it very much from the ground up.
Yeah, absolutely. And then if you think because it's a highly regulated field, but the regulators weren't, they didn't have the experience either, so you ended up having telephone calls with the MHRA and sort of debating about what was appropriate, and so it was interesting.
So writing, I suppose, some of the early stage processes and procedures and regulatory stuff, kind of in conjunction with some of the folks at the MHRA to put it in place. It's quite amazing, actually. I haven't thought about it that way.
It's amazing when you think back of where the field is now, but at that time we were definitely at the cutting edge, and I think RoslinCT still is, but at that point it was properly breaking new ground.
What was it that made you all think that actually, this is a viable proposition? Because if it hadn't, it was a completely unproven ground, but you obviously had in mind that there was a commercial opportunity here. What was it that indicated that?
I think at the early stages it was that that you could see the direction the field was going. I think it was to be able to achieve it, and then the commercial side of it would come. And I think probably the commercial side didn't come as quickly as it could have. But I think it was just and I wouldn't say I personally had that vision. For me, initially, it was about let's make sure we can achieve what we've set out to achieve.
Right.
And but it was the right vision. Ultimately, but it took a long time in the making, just because the field had to catch up.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite an unusual model in some ways. I mean, there are a lot of businesses that are set up in existing marketplaces where there's an existing knowledge and there's pathways are already reasonably well trodden, if not completely understood. But that's not where you guys were, so yeah.
And I think at that time that, in the States there was work happening with stem cells, and there was sort of that early shoots of regenerative medicine was happening. And I think because it was everyone was breaking new ground. Everything took a bit longer. The regulators were trying to get up to speed with it all. So and all these things always take longer than you think. But I would say that compared to your normal pharmaceutical development, now cell and gene therapy, you can develop a therapy more quickly. But in those early days, it was just everything had to come together for it all to just be a viable option, I think.
I suppose that the period where you became more established, a lot of that work was done. Some of those, pathways, as it were, had become viable, or the concept was proven, and so on. What then kind of became the biggest issue in the business and for you?
So I think talking about the vision of where to take the business, I think once I got established in Roslin Cells, and we were one of the first to deliver clinical grade embryonic stem cells, for me, I could really see the vision of Roslin's having developed the skill set that took for us to be able to then translate other therapies that involve stem cells, and they were then differentiated into the specific cell type, that we could do that for other people and actually provide a service with the know-how that we had to become a contract development and manufacturing organisation. So I was quite dogged in the fact that I really thought that was the vision for the business, and it wasn't until we spun out RoslinCT from Roslin Cells and I became the chief exec that I could really drive that. And I think that a lot of people doubted that was going to be successful, because obviously it needs a lot of investment. And when RoslinCT was established and hyped out, actually there was a sort of P&L for that part of the business, and the business was losing money, and it was a real challenge. So I would say the first thing was for me to start to balance the books, and I was quite obsessive about the finances, because I knew that if the business didn't have a solid financial footing, it wasn't going to survive. So the challenge was to kind of live within our means. So that meant reducing the staff numbers, looking at the projects we were doing and which ones were actually going to be profitable or not, and all of that. It was almost like you were fighting for your life to keep the business what we had achieved to that point ready for this next stage. So I think the challenges were balancing the books. It's obviously challenging when you have to let people go, and who to let go and how to do that right. And then it was trying to win new business, and I think it was a case of trying to keep all the plates spinning while keeping the business going forward. And I think it was just absolute hard work, determination, and a bit of luck as well. But actually, from that point on, the business never made a loss in that entire period. And that was down to like a lot of hard work. So because we were a small team, another of the challenges was basically how hard everyone had to work to deliver on the projects. And looking back, it was really pretty hard going, even for something with a high work thing.
Was it important that everybody was on the mission and with the mission, as it were, in the business? Absolutely. And I think when looking at taking the business forward, that was really important. And I think because of my style, I think I really tried to bring people with me, and the loyalty and the way people approached these early days was quite phenomenal. And I think it was interesting in that because it's cell and gene therapy, and because you're developing therapies that are going to ultimately totally transform somebody's life, the motivation was there for everyone, because we're all thinking, if we do this right, we could actually really change somebody's life. So as well as it, you could say there's good leadership and all of that, but actually the why we did it was there, and that really motivated everyone, I would say. That's cool, actually. I think that the why is a vastly underestimated kind of motivator, isn't it? You know, if people really believe in what they're doing and that they're bringing something, you know, of value to, you know, mankind or whatever section of the community or whatever, then there's, you know, there's something really quite kind of energizing about all of that, isn't there?
Absolutely. And I think because it's, you know, obviously people say what were the challenges of manufacturing, cell and gene therapy, so say all of it. You know, you're in a clean room environment and you're working with cells that have sometimes perform differently than you would expect, and you know that, or you might have equipment that's kind of fairly new in the field and it doesn't perform as well as it should, so it breaks down regardless of how much you maintain it. So all these challenges were kind of had to be dealt with, not by me always, but by the team that would actually manufacture the cells. It was them.
So it's nothing easy. No easy, but just to drop into everything else. Oh, great! I can use paperwork today.
And people, you know, as well as the, you know, the business, we didn't develop a huge amount of IP. There was a lot of know-how, and people would talk about, you know, the value and the barriers to entry. But when you think of the skill set, the knowledge, the challenges, and you know, it's not something you just step into. It takes years to be able to do it, and then the licenses that you need to have in place.
So regardless of the I suppose the value that some might see in IP, the know-how and the high bar that's there to actually replicate what you guys did was of such significance that the value was building in there anyway.
Absolutely. And I think being a service business as well, you know, you add that into the mix. That was a huge part of the business, was the looking after our clients well and making sure they were sort of part of the whole team. And you know, I think for my own, I always kind of drew on the sort of Highland hospitality. You know, you treat people well, and it's almost your instinct in some ways. So I think we really knew how to look after the customers, and we didn't always do it right, but I think that was another part of it.
All about stretching back to your childhood as well.
Absolutely.
That's brilliant. Is what you've achieved, I suppose a bit of a close question, what you set out to achieve, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I set out to make sure the business was a well-run business, it was profitable. That was the first objective, and then the second objective was to take it and truly become a global player. And I think that's really certainly been achieved. And you know, if you look at RoslinCT at the point that GHO, the investor, took over the business, we were working with international clients. We had we were known globally, but now since the investment and takeover, there's a site in Boston. It truly is a global brand and kind of one of the leading cell and gene therapy CDMOs. So I'm quite proud of where we started, and I did have that vision that we can do this from where we are now here in Edinburgh. And look at it now, I'm pretty proud of where the business is.
Yeah, should be hugely gratifying that you know, it's I suppose a Scottish company run by yourselves and your team that has had a very kind of international mindset right from inception and has achieved that, as opposed to, you know, just sold to somebody who has then kind of gone on to tack you on to a larger organisation. The driving force seems to be RoslinCT and the original team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, you know, when you know, there was all the different iterations of building the teams, and you were involved with a lot of it. It was getting the right people into the management team that could, you know, take it forward. And I think as well as that, there was building a board that really were supportive and understood the vision for the business too. And that was the board that we had in the end was just absolutely ideal for taking the business to where it got to. So it was a real team effort. And I think also, thinking about being a CEO, see it's a lonely place. And I think probably from the isolation that I was brought up in, you have a self-reliance that you develop, but ultimately you need a team around you, and we had a really strong management team, and I had a really strong network as well. And I think you can't underestimate the fact that you need to have a community around you, I think.
Yeah, it takes a village to grow a child, or something like that. Or a croft, maybe just. And if you had the opportunity to go back, give yourself advice, at the various kind of, difficult stages of the journey you've been on, what would it be?
Good question. I think I've been thinking about it, and I think probably a couple of things. One is to try and conserve your energy or use it wisely. And even now, it's really appreciating what you achieve at each stage. And, when you're really trying to drive the business forward, you're thinking of what's next. And you're always trying to manage the risks, and so you're thinking constantly of how do we make sure we do this better, how do we stop that happening. And you do celebrate your successes, but really to stop and appreciate and see, oh, that was pretty phenomenal actually.
See the journey you've gone on, as opposed to the tiny last couple of steps that took you over the line. You're not celebrating the whole thing, and therefore you kind of underestimate just how much of an achievement you've had, as it were.
Exactly. And I think it's also living in the moment a bit as well, where you're so busy having to think about where we're going that you don't always appreciate the day you're in.
What you've actually done. I suppose lying in bed at night kind of worrying about this, that and the other, that in the grand scheme of things wasn't important, but didn't allow you to necessarily celebrate the achievements or relax to some extent as much as you would otherwise have been able to do. I don't know.
And I think it's also having confidence in your instincts. For me, I think I've got pretty good instincts, but I was always, people might have doubted, or I would be second checking and making sure that I was doing the right thing, but actually probably being a bit more relaxed and trusting my instincts and having confidence to say, no, this is exactly the right thing to do.
Lacking confidence, that's it. We're all leaving. Bye. Great. Well, listen, thank you very much indeed for your time this afternoon. That's been wonderful. And I will now click.